National Film Board of Canada presents Perspective, a Canadian view of Canada, its people, and the world in which they live. This week, Perspective presents Canadians Abroad by William Weintraub.
Almost any visitor to London, England, particularly on their first trip, sooner or later gets to Trafalgar Square. Maureen Irwin and Marion Lee of Medicine Hat, Alberta are no exception, and they're just two of thousands of Canadian tourists who visit the old country every year. This part of London sort of belongs to us. Just look at the buildings around here. Need a ticket back home? Right here on Trafalgar Square. Want to do a little banking? Fix up that insurance policy? Certainly. The other Canadian banks have branches nearby and lots of other businesses too. Near the square, you'll find provincial government offices, Alberta House, Ontario House, the BC office, and here's Canada House, office of the High Commissioner to the United Kingdom. It's Canadian headquarters in London. Lots of tourists drop in here to sign the visitor's book and to look through it. Why, if you're lucky, you may find somebody right from your own hometown. Reverse immigration, you might call it. There are lots of them here doing all kinds of jobs. Why, there was once even a Canadian who became Prime Minister here at the Mother of Parliaments. That was about 35 years ago when Bonar Law, a businessman from New Brunswick, held office. Today, one London constituency is represented by a man from Toronto, Sir Beverley Baxter. I asked Sir Beverley if it was difficult for a Canadian to get elected here.
Well, of course, it isn't easy for anybody to get elected. That's why they have elections. So we have to fight them. But we have five Canadian MPs in the House. There's Bill Aitken, Lord Beaverbrook's nephew, first rate on colonial affairs. There's Ted Leather from Hamilton, who's making his way very well. There's Don Donaldson from Vancouver, who has a Scottish seat. And there's Sir Peter MacDonald from the Isle of Wight, who's been there a very long time. He's from Nova Scotia. And there were five, weren't there? The fifth, oh yes, I'm sorry, I am the fifth. Well, I fought 5 elections. I'm not sure that I'll fight another one.
When did you first come to England?
Oh, I came over with the Canadian Army in the First War and went to France. But then I came back and joined the Beaver in 1920, and after a time, he made me editor of the Sunday Express, and a little later, he made me editor of the Daily Express. I don't know whether he should have done it or not, but he did.
Then you get into politics.
Yes, I thought after a time I'd had enough of editing, and so, 1935, I went into Parliament.
Isn't this a rather unusual combination, newspaper work and politics?
Well, no. The writer-politician is an established feature of English life. Forgive me mentioning very, very big names, but John Buchan, when I was a member in the House, you'd see him working away in the library on his novels. Buchan afterwards, of course, went to Rideau Hall as Governor General, where I think he did some writing there as well. And, of course, there was a promising young fellow named Disraeli, who used to do a lot of writing, and Sheridan. It was actually, while he was the Minister of the Crown, ran Covent Garden Opera House. So you see, at least I'm in the great tradition, even if I'm not one of the greats.
Well, Sir Beverley, after all these years in Britain, do you now consider yourself more of an Englishman than a Canadian?
Oh, no. Oh, no, I am a Canadian living in England. I don't know how one could become an Englishman. I have lived here a long time. I still don't understand how they decide what they're going to do with the vowel A. For example, although this is perhaps rather a silly example, an Englishman would say, give me my hat and I'll have a bath. And how he decides that it's hat and bath, only he knows. It has something to do with the climate. So I think I remain a Canadian, perhaps something of a Londoner, but not English. And my heart, my ancestry, is with Canada.
Why do you suppose so many Canadians come over here?
Well, I might answer that by reminding you of the old story of General Blücher, or Blücher, whatever you call it, who was on our side at the Battle of Waterloo. And he came over to London. They gave him a great reception, and they took him up to the top, to the dome of St. Paul's Cathedral. And he looked over London, and he said in his guttural German voice, "What a city to sack." And I suppose we Canadians come over here are something in that same spirit.
Well, how do the English take this Canadian invasion?
Oh, they take it in their strides. You see, the English have been invaded all through the centuries. The Romans, the Danes, the Normans, the Scots, now the Canadians. That's in the great tradition.
Well, Sir Beverley, do you get a chance to meet some of these invading Canadians?
Oh, yes, especially at this time of the year, when it seems to me that most of Maclean's readers, who are good enough to read my London letter, turn up. They're very modest in what they ask. They usually want 4 good seats for a debate in which Sir Winston Churchill is speaking. But I have one thing that's puzzling me. I have a letter from a Canadian saying his daughter's coming over, and would I arrange a private audience with the Queen? I haven't quite decided yet what I can do about that one.
Out on Old Brompton Road, you'll find a coffee shop called the Troubadour. It's owned and operated by Sheila and Mike Van Bloemen from Montreal.
This coffee. Oh, I know what you'd like. Something over here. This old English bicycle, penny farthing.
Where on earth did you find that?
Auction sale.
Oh, I guess you spent half your life at auction sales then.
Well, most of the things we pick up in junk stores, those copper pans, for instance, the irons, coffee grinders, they all come from junk stores.
No.
Oh, not the tree. The tree we cut down in the middle of the night in a park in
that's
London.
an unusual thing to find in a meeting place.
It is. When the health department had to give us our okay, they said, since you've just come over from Canada, he said, I want to tell you something about English habits. People don't like a big change. And one thing, he said, you must take that tree down because no one will come in here and have coffee with a dead tree in it.
Mike, do you find that this sort of atmosphere attracts a lot of artists among your customers?
Artists, writers, painters, sculptors. We have some of their pictures over there on the wall.
Oh.
The first one is Shirley. She used to be a waitress for us. Vanjie this year is up at Stratford doing costumes. Stratford, England, that is. What's her name? Joan. Joan is in a West End play right now. The most interesting is Madame Zora. She's a musician.
She writes books.
And author. She has a whole wall completely plastered with rejection slips. She's proud of them.
Crazy.
The next is their husband and wife. They're both artists studying. And, of course, Doris, who's always trying to get into pictures.
What made you decide to come to England, Mike?
Oh, Sheila and I have often wanted to open a coffee bar, but with $3,000, you can't go very far in Canada. So we came to
Yeah,
England.
it means a lot here.
I see. But if you had the chance, would you like to open a cafe of this kind in Canada?
I don't think we really could.
Why not?
Well, with high
Overheads,
rents
yeah.
and overheads and so on, it would be very hard.
I see.
You have to get the customers in and out.
In and out. Here, they can stay the whole evening on 1 cup of coffee and still make a profit on them.
Well, more of a social evening then, is it?
It is.
Yes.
Some of them come in with their guitars and entertain the other customers who haven't got guitars downstairs.
Tell you the sad story of my life. Because I started life with certain disadvantages some of you may know about. Now my name is Samuel Hall, Samuel Hall. My name is Samuel Hall, Samuel Hall. My name is Samuel Hall, and I hate you one and all. Yes, I hate you one and all.
Mordecai Richler is a young Canadian novelist who has had 2 books published in England, and there have been translations into several languages.
I've been living in Europe for about 5 or 6 years, on and off. I came back to England in 1953. I spent a good deal of time in France, Italy, and Germany, and in Spain in particular.
What made you decide to leave Canada?
Canada is a very provincial country, but more important, I think, for a writer in particular, it is very important to leave your country in order to understand it better, if only for that reason.
Do you feel you're getting more encouragement here in England than you would have at home?
Yes, certainly. I could give you an example. When my first novel came out, I sent a proof to a rather well-known Canadian writer and asked for a recommendation, only if he liked the book. He was very rude. He took a long time in replying. I don't even think he read the book. Here, writers are not nearly so pompous. They're very accessible. One can meet them at parties, and I've had no difficulty at all in getting recommendations from an extremely well-known writer and some very well-known critics.
Mordecai, do you think that novelists aren't respected very much in Canada?
I don't want to be respected, man. I just want to be accepted. Novelists, I'm afraid, are regarded as something of freaks in Canada today. Here, you're accepted as a man doing an honest day's work. When I was last in Canada, people would ask me, what do you do? And I'd say, I write novels. And they'd say, but what kind of work do you do?
Does that mean that you don't want to go back home to Canada?
Oh, no, I fully intend going back. I'm a Canadian writer. I write about Canadians.
Are you here on a scholarship now?
No, I'm earning my own way, but not with my novels. I supplement my income by writing for TV and film. But I do find it cheaper living here than I would find it in Canada.
Money's no problem here, if you remember that 2 farthings equal a halfpenny, 2 halfpennies a penny, 12 pennies a shilling, 20 shillings a pound, 21 shillings a guinea. Now, there's no guinea note and there's no crown, but there's a half crown. That's 2 shillings and a tanner being 6pence and not to be confused with a tenner, which is 10 quid, which is roughly $28. With a system like that, you'd think that Canadians who go into business would immediately go broke. But some of them do quite nicely, like Douglas Connor of Vancouver. He's chairman of this company on the outskirts of London. Here, aeroplane engines are overhauled. After they've flown 150,000 miles, they come here to be taken apart, checked, cleaned, and reassembled.
We get these engines from all over, Fred. Some of them may be going to Mozambique or East Africa, Pakistan, Singapore, just about wherever you want to name.
Oh.
This one, for example, is going out to Union of Burma Airways in Rangoon.
You get to visit these places yourself?
Yes, I do. Last year, in fact, I traveled so much that I spent something like $20,000 in airline tickets alone.
How did you come to get into this business, Doug?
I was a pilot in the RCF during the war, and when the war was over, I came back to Europe and joined a Belgian charter airline. With this airline, we flew to the Middle East, Africa, and the Far East. And while out there, I spent some time organizing the first Pakistan National Airline. After that was done and set up, I came back to Europe and continued with the business of buying and selling used airplanes.
That sounds like a rather unusual business.
It is, Fred. It's the most unusual business. But I suppose it's a little bit like a used car business, only it takes a lot more money to handle it. For example, suppose a Turkish airline has an airplane for sale, a DC-4. Maybe we know a company in Sweden who wants it, so we arrange the transaction.
Why did you pick England for your factory?
For a number of very good reasons, Fred. First, I think this particular type of business has a fine chance of success here, where in Canada it's pretty well tied up by large organizations. Secondly, there's a very skilled and cheaper labor force here, so we can turn out the products better. Thirdly, we can sell from here to the sterling area, to countries who are short of dollars, and they can pay us in pounds sterling.
Well, generally speaking, Doug, do you think that Canadians can do well in business here?
Yes, Fred, I would. The Canadian accent, first of all, can open a lot of doors for you. The British respect the fact that we're energetic and efficient. They also respect the way we do business. So it's simply a matter of finding out exactly what they need and supplying it.
One of the things they need in England is hockey players, and Canada supplies quite a few. The game has a small, steady following here. Average attendance is about 6,000, with 5 professional teams in the league. Right now, you're watching the Wembley Lions. 3/4 of their players are Canadians. Quite a few rules are different here. Watch this man get the boards. That's what you'd see in a Canadian game. But watch this. That's about as rough as you're allowed to get in British hockey. But can players from Canada change their habits? Teaching them how is one of the jobs of player-coach Sonny Rost, originally from Winnipeg.
They catch on pretty quickly over here. They soon realize that the fans don't like the rough type of play, and they like plenty of fast skating and stick handling.
Are the rules more strict here?
Oh, a lot stricter. There's no body checking on the other side of the blue line, and anybody that's involved in any fisticuffs or misconducts is automatic $50 fine or 2-game suspension.
Do you find lots of Canadian players that want to come over here?
Oh, yes. I generally need about 5 players, and I have a lot of applications, about 30.
Every year?
Every year, yes.
Do they settle down once they get here to stay?
Oh, yes, they settle down. We got about 20 Canadians over here, and they're more or less here permanently. Mm-hmm. But, some of the boys, they stay here maybe 2 years and go home.
How about traveling? Do you do much of that in the league?
Oh, that's a good thing about it. We have had tours over in Switzerland, Germany, Italy, Finland, Norway, Russia, Czechoslovakia.
How long have you been playing in England, Sonny?
Oh, I come over here in 1934, the year that the rink was built, and I played the first hockey match here.
By the way, are you married?
Yes, I'm married to an English girl. I got 3 children.
Think you'll ever take them back to Canada eventually?
Well, I hope I'll be able to get back to see my mother and my father, but I'm more or less established over here in England, and ambition to have maybe a little English pub and settle down.
You wouldn't come all the way to London just to see a hockey game. But the theater, well, that's different. There's so much to see, and it's just a matter of making up your mind and buying tickets. Whatever you choose, there's a chance that there'll be a Canadian somewhere in the cast. Lots of Canadian entertainers have made good here, in the theater, in radio and television, and in the ballet, in opera, and music generally. Best known of all are Toronto's Bernard Braden and his wife, Barbara Kelly. They were among Canada's best-known radio stars when they left for England. Here, they've made a big hit on the stage and on television as well. They've starred in more than a dozen TV plays, and they've had 3 comedy series. There's been a discussion series as well, and Barbara is a regular on the British version of What's My Line. In the theater, they've been in a number of West End plays, Barbara scoring a big success as Peter Pan. Besides acting, Bernard has directed 2 plays.
You see, Fred, when we first came over here in 1949, there was no television in Canada. There were no feature films. Thank you. How very English. Merci bien. And we wanted to come and learn something about theater, about films, and about television. At that time, it didn't exist, so that was our main reason for coming here.
Well, did you find it difficult getting established in British show business?
Well, we were sort of lucky. We took an audition with the BBC and radio first, very dramatic, we thought, and as a result of it, they gave us a comedy series. Barbara was on television as a guest for, about 2 weeks after we arrived. That led to her being in a play in the West End, The Male Animal, and about 2 months after that, I went into Streetcar Named Desire with Vivian Leigh. So we were real lucky.
Well, in a way, we were lucky, certainly, but I think we must remember that in Canada and under Mr. Andrew Allen, we got some experience that was pretty invaluable to us.
I'll buy that.
Okay.
So actually you had no real problems then from the time you landed?
Well...
You qualify that, will you? I suppose being an entertainer here, though, is quite a bit different than it is in Canada.
Well, yeah, it's more like being in the business. Again, I can only speak in terms of what it was like in '49, but when we left, as I remember it, we used to do radio programs for people whose sets wouldn't pick up American programs. And so we didn't really have a public. We had employers, and they occasionally told us they liked what we did. The money was fine, but we didn't have a public. Over here, you do a play, for example, and the public come to see you, or they don't. But at least you're on your own, and you know whether you're bringing the money in or not. And it seems a little more like an honest business. And if you do have a public, and they get to like you, they like you all your life, and that's pretty good insurance in this business.
And to us, of course, Canada just didn't seem to care. You know, we worked in anonymity for about 15 years, as we said before, in Canada, which was a good thing. But there comes a point, in anybody's life, good or bad, it doesn't matter what they are, that they want a little recognition, whether it's good or bad, too.
Do you plan to ever go back to Canada?
Well, a lot of people have asked us that one, and the answer is really pretty simple. We haven't been asked to go back by anybody. And we're eating here. We got 3 children, and to whip them all together, put them in a boat or a plane, take them back would be a big undertaking without a definite offer from somebody.
You know, the other thing is we're a little afraid to go back to Canada because the very fact of us going back sometimes makes people think that we're a bit of a failure. And also, we have had the attitude that Canadians say to us, if you're any good, why do you stay in Canada? Why don't you get out? But we have found certainly that as far as we're concerned, the acting standard in Canada is as high as anything you could find in anywhere else in the world. And this, I think we both believe, huh?
Well, let me put it this way. Would you like to go back to Canada?
Well, I can't really speak for Barbara, but...
yes, you can.
All right. We have a hankering now and then to go back and really try it against our own people again, the competition, because here we sometimes feel that they only hire us because we don't have an English accent and they need somebody else.
I beg your pardon, sir. Mind you, we like living in London, too. It's a fascinating city and lots of marvelous things going on all the time.
And if we get tired of London, hop in a plane, 1 hour, we're in Paris.
Ah, that's for me.
Avez-vous des croissants?
Des croissants, oui, certainement.
Et de beurre?
Des tartines.
Tartines?
Oui, ça.
Ça va, oui.
Très bien, monsieur, je vous apporte ça.
Tartines. It's a new one. Tartines.
Paris, and a girl from Canada. Her name could be Marie, or Frances, or Francoise. She might be from Quebec, or from Toronto, or from somewhere else. There are lots like her here. They've come to study, or to work, to paint, or act, or dance, to stay for a year or for much longer in this fascinating city. Some of the Canadian expatriates, like Aglé, are famous here. She's a singer who came over from Montreal and stayed to become one of the best-known entertainers in Paris. Of course, men from Canada have been successful, too, all the way from a wrestler named Yvon Robert to an artist called Jean-Paul Riopelle, one of the world's foremost abstract painters. How much would you charge me for a painting like that, Jean-Paul?
Well, for you, Fred, for a small painting like that, a couple of $1,000.
Oh, a small painting? I think I'd have a little trouble getting that on the plane, don't you?
Well, you can use it as a flying carpet.
That's an idea. Tell me, do you actually sell these paintings personally yourself?
They are sold through galleries. I have 2 galleries, one in New York and one in Paris.
Oh, they arrange the prices in the business
Yes, that's
end,
why
eh?
I don't know exactly the price.
Mm-hmm. Where would an individual, for example, be able to buy a large painting like this?
Well, I was surprised to hear that many individuals have bought, but they are ordinary, sold to museums.
Oh, what museums have bought your paintings?
Well, I have in New York the Museum of Modern Art, Guggenheim.
Yes.
I think there is some in National Gallery.
In Ottawa?
In Ottawa.
Oh, yes.
And Switzerland, in France, too.
So your work is pretty well all over the world now, is it?
I think so.
Mm-hmm. Tell me, when you're beginning a painting, Jean-Paul, do you have a clear-cut, specific idea of what you want to paint?
No. The idea is really general. And because I work in series, and sometimes there is 6, 7 paintings.
All on the same theme?
On the same theme. And the painting get close or away from that theme.
Now, you have to wait then till you've finished a painting before you can title it, for example.
Yes, and sometimes like on this painting, which is called La Roue, the title is very difficult to find in the painting himself.
La Roue, what is that?
It's the wheel.
The wheel. I can't see a wheel there myself.
No, some other paintings are more easy.
I see.
Because, for example, like that one, the painting is called Le Papillon. It's butterfly.
The butterfly, oh yes.
Yes, it's part of a series of paintings on spring.
I see.
And maybe you can see one butterfly, but it's a texture of the wings of the butterfly that I think I'll try to interpret.
It's a combination of impressions of butterfly wings, would that be
correct?
Yes,
close to the idea of spring.
Mm-hmm. I see. How long have you been working in Paris now?
Since 1946-7.
Do you find it's easier for you to work here rather than in Canada?
Yes, It's not because Canada have no possibility to bring subject or anything like that. The nature is very nice. But Paris is a center where all the artists come. Then we can meet the other, and well, there is museum and things like that.
So you get more inspiration here at the moment, eh? More
Yes.
freedom?
Yes, that's it, exactly. It's a question of freedom, probably, for artists.
Yes, Paris can mean a lot of work if you're a serious artist, or if you go to school like the Campbell children. They're from Vancouver, but they've been living in France for 7 years. Their father works for UNESCO in Paris, so Sheila, Bonnie, and Robin are growing up here. Bonjour, Sheila.
Bonjour, monsieur. Veux-tu aller jouer avec ton bateau? Oui.
Dis-moi, Sheila, est-ce que tu plais d'aller à l'école en France?
Oui, j'aime beaucoup l'école en France.
Ah bon. Et toi, Bonnie?
Oui, c'est très bien.
Ah.
Tu veux aller jouer aussi? Oui. Au revoir, monsieur Davis.
Au revoir. How about you, Mrs. Campbell? What do you think about the children going to French schools?
I'm a little worried about it. I feel that in some respects they may be getting a better education here than their Canadian cousins. I think they may be building up trouble for themselves.
Oh, how do you mean?
Well, in France, if you're getting more than a primary school education, you're expected to be intelligent. In Canada, we like our girls to be attractive, but men are afraid of intelligent women.
You mean they may have trouble finding husbands in Canada?
Perhaps, but that's a long way off, of course.
Yes.
However, when they do go back to Canada, they may find themselves in what seems to them a cultural desert. If they take a typical French secondary education, they'll end up knowing 2 languages besides English. They'll be used to seeing much more theater and ballet, to hearing much more good music. And they'll be used to reading newspapers which contain more than the ads.
And they'll be seeing other people, too, and visiting other countries. Italy, Germany, Yugoslavia, Hungary, Spain, Austria.
Well, then, do you think that education is better here in every respect?
Oh, no, not at all. Some of the physical and sanitary conditions of local schools are very bad. There is no amateur dramatics, no handicrafts, next to no sports.
In fact, to Canadians, it isn't education for modern living. It's very old-fashioned, and there's plenty of discipline.
On this question of discipline, though, some people in Canada have given their children too much liberty. We find that the discipline in the French schools gives the children a sense of security. And also, their insistence on good manners teaches an accepted way of behavior so that they're more at ease socially.
But then, after all that, I imagine they'd end up really knowing something, wouldn't they?
Well, that's the point, they do. And I'd say that they get an education that you wouldn't get in Canada.
More than anyone else, it's the artists who are attracted to Paris. Many of them, like Toby Steinhaus of Montreal, wouldn't want to be anywhere else. For one thing, they say there's a special light here, which is unique in itself. But whether you're an artist or a bus driver, a mannequin or a tourist, Paris has for each its own enchantment. No wonder so many Canadians have made it their home. Now, from the banks of the Seine, this is Fred Davis bidding you adieu.
This week's Perspective was directed by Don Haldane. Written by William Weintraub. Reported by Fred Davis. Photography, Eugene Boyko. Sound recording, Jack Locke. Editor, Tony Lower. Production assistant, Blanche Markle. Location manager, Lee Gordon. Sound editor, Brian Keene. Special sound, Joan Edward. Perspective is a National Film Board of Canada production, produced by Julian Biggs.